$42. $42 for a single roll of film. That's just astronomical, even by the current state of affairs with film. But the purpose of this video is to see whether or not this $42 roll of film is worth your time, your money. Are the results that good? And is it worth shooting going forward in 2023?
Well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Just before we get started, guys, if you want to support the channel, head over to 35strapco.com.au. That is my camera strap company. I make all of these by hand myself, hand-stitched, hand-cut. If you want to support the channel, head over there, pick up a strap. It goes a long way to keeping these videos coming. Thank you again. So obviously, guys, an expensive film like this, I'm obviously talking about slide film. That's right, slide film, and specifically Kodak Ektachrome right here. Now, I'm specifically talking about Ektachrome, but I feel like this is going to be the only slide film within the next couple of years because Fujifilm keep pulling stocks, as we know, left, right, and center, and they keep having supply issues and procuring raw material issues. Doesn't seem to stop Kodak. But again, Kodak Ektachrome will probably be the only slide film left in a couple of years, which is why I'm focusing on this today. So, Ektachrome E100, it was discontinued and then re-released back in 2018 by Kodak. Much to the happiness, the fanfare of the film community, it felt like a really good time. Like, okay, they've brought back a new film, exciting times coming for Kodak, for the film community. Little did we know what was going to happen in a couple of years. But anyway, came back 2018, and I didn't shoot much of it then because it was expensive then. It's even more expensive now. So though this single roll of film cost $42, to actually shoot the whole thing, probably going to cost about $66, $67 because you've got to factor in the development and scanning of E6, of slide film. It's a lot more expensive than color neg, different set of chemicals, E6 chemicals. So essentially, we're looking at about $66 or $67, if my math is correct, dollars per roll of this. Now that works out to be about $1.80 something, $1.80-ish, let's say call it $1.80 per photo for 36 exposures. Now that is ludicrous in my mind, but is it worth it? I mean, slide film's renowned for being beautiful and saturated colors, rich contrast. Is it worth spending the extra money to shoot a film stock like this, or are you better off just still shooting color negative, or even buying an old CCD sensor here like my Nikon D200, which are, the CCD sensors have prided themselves on having that slide film look. Are you better off shooting something like this instead and saving your money? So there are some inherent problems I feel with slide film straight off the bat. The most notably being that I've already covered, and that's price, guys. It is expensive to shoot this film. It's expensive to develop this film. So it has that working against itself. Next is the exposure latitude. Now, as a lot of people you may not know, but for those of you, most people do know, that slide film is very, very, very minute in its exposure latitude. Whereas color negative, you can overexpose by a couple stops or under by a couple stops and still save the film. Slide film has to be very, very spot on because one stop over and you lose all your shadow details or all your highlight details. You have to be very precise. So again, makes it a bit more, you've got to be a bit more pedantic with your metering and composition when you're shooting slide. And the last thing it has against it is obviously the time it takes to get developed. Now, most labs within Australia don't process E6 these days. A lot of labs just packed up shop and stopped doing it because it's too expensive and not enough people are shooting slides, so they got rid of the equipment. They don't do, or just don't do it anymore. And a lot of it's done manually as well these days, unless it's an old school lab with big dip and dunk machines. Anyway, the time frame with shooting slide is pretty bad. I mean, I had to wait. These negatives I have actually already shot because I filmed and shot all the photos and video that you guys are going to see 4 weeks ago. So it's been a month since I shot this film. Now, that's not a knock on my lab who developed it. It's just that's the game with E6. Labs only develop them in small batches these days, and they have to wait until they have X amount of rolls to use in their Jobo, Filmamat, whatever they're using. So you are generally going to be experiencing a long wait time with getting your slides back. Generally. Some labs may be super quick, I don't know, but generally that's the rule. It's not like as quick as color negative. But obviously there are some positives to shooting slide film, not all negatives. I'm not just doing this for no reason. Slide film is renowned for having very, very deep, rich, and beautiful colors. Now, you just have to go back and look at any of the old beautiful Kodachrome stocks. Unfortunately, if you don't know what Kodachrome is, don't even type it into your computer. It will just make you depressed. But lo and behold, more or less most of the, let's say, National Geographic photos you would have seen throughout the 80s, 90s, maybe very early 2000s would have all been shot on slide film. Those beautiful, rich greens, blues. It's all beautiful, renowned for slide film. Even the Leica M9, which is, I would say, probably the camera that garners the biggest cult status when it comes to the color output from that camera. That was a Kodak CCD sensor designed around Kodachrome. And the other great thing slide film has going for it is it's a positive, guys. You do not need to scan it to see your photos. All you need to do is hold the negatives up to a light, whack them down on a light table, and you can instantly see the glorious results. You may need a loupe, a little magnifier, and you can get a nice closer look, but throwing it down on a light table is pretty amazing. And if you haven't ever done it before, I recommend shooting slides simply for the fact of getting your negs back and looking at them on a light table. So without further ado, let's get rolling, guys. Now, I am shooting this roll, well, I shot this roll, I should say, through my Nikon F6. Now, why did I do that? For one of the reasons I told you about before, guys, the exposure latitude. Now, the Nikon F6 here has Nikon's proprietary matrix metering system. Say that 5 times fast. Essentially, it's just a long way of saying the metering within the F6 is very, very accurate, very, very precise. It actually lends itself perfectly to shooting slides. And I can safely say to you, because I do have the negatives back, unfortunately, like I said, I shot this all a month ago. I was waiting to get it back. Every single frame was perfectly exposed. The Nikon F6 definitely did its job, correctly exposing. Every single frame was spot on. So that's why I chose that camera, and it worked out well. So let's take a trip back in time about 4 weeks ago, and we'll look at some of the video and some of the photos I shot, and then we'll all check back in afterwards and see, was it worth it? What are the results like? What do we all think? So the first place we started, guys, was up along the coast with a nice morning walk with me and the boys and the dogs. I figured Ektachrome is known for those beautiful blues, so why not shoot the blue ocean, kind of ocean landscape style stuff, see what we can find up along the coast. Thought it would be a good start. Unfortunately, there was no surf and it was, pretty small, so just kind of photographed people and the ocean in general. You guys know where we are now. We're in the parkway to the rear of my house, just because of all the vines and the foliage, the green foliage that grows through the back area there. I knew I had to test what Ektachrome was going to look like and how it was going to render the beautiful greens, and I was not disappointed. These were probably some of my favorite shots, not because they're groundbreaking shots, just they're very amazing to look at, especially the silhouetted spiderweb shots I took here. They just came out beautifully on the slides. Later that afternoon, me, my wife, and the boys went for a walk around Lake Gwelup near my house, just because, again, I thought testing the slides in contrast to the blue ocean. I had a lot of the greens and browns and reed, that sort of thing around the lake area, and I thought that would be a good test to make for some interesting pictures as well. And lastly, guys, I had to do a little bit of street photography. I thought, you know what, I need to go for a walk in the city, which I did the following day, see what I can find, see what I can shoot. Unfortunately, I did find it kind of counterproductive, which we'll jump into later. But I made a couple photos, nothing I'm proud of, but just another good way to show off the colors of slide film. So I definitely have to say, guys, you know, it was a long process, and I was kind of surprised with some of the photos I got back, pleasantly surprised. Most of the street photos were garbage. Unfortunately, I reckon a lot of the beach photos it was too bright blue of a day. It was a beautiful morning that we went out, me and the boys went out. Just Kodachrome, not Kodachrome, I wish Kodachrome. Ektachrome is known for having, you know, a rich or rich blues, and they definitely shone through then. The street photos, I think slide film in general for shooting street photography is, I can't do it. I was so worried that each photo was $1.80 per photo, and I didn't want to waste a photo. I didn't want to have an underexposed or an out of focus photo. I was, you know, even though I will say focus wise, the F6 just nails everything. Perfect, amazing camera for street photography, if you can deal with the size and the noise. But I was so nervous about the money associated with each press of the shutter that I didn't take a lot of shots on the street. I didn't take very many shots because I just thought, this is expensive. I don't want to waste the slide film on a crappy street photo. That's why I bulk roll and shoot a lot of black and white film. So definitely counterproductive, and I wouldn't shoot slide personally for street photography again. Next, the beautiful colors, guys. Now, especially from the photos that you would have seen when we walk out the back of my house, the little parkway there, all those beautiful greens, rich, beautiful greens, absolutely amazing, fantastic colors. Definitely did what I thought the slide film was going to do, render those. It rendered those beautifully. Now, the big ticket question: would I shoot it again? No, quite frankly, no. Now, as cool as it was putting those negatives on my light table and having a look, it's definitely magical. I don't think I would bother shooting it again because it's just so much money. Again, like I said, it cost me $67 to shoot that and get it developed. $67. That's just ludicrous. Now, again, that's probably only, 2 rolls of Kodak Portrait now at the current prices, so you could say that. But then again, it's half the price for a develop of C41. But when I was going through editing these photos, broke out the old 10 megapixel CCD D200 here because it's just very inherent. A lot of the photos I took, the color output reminded me of what I get from this D200. And I honestly think with the price it being now, unless you're a landscape photographer and you're shooting 4x5 magical, 4x5 or 6x17 medium format, big expansive landscapes on slide film, and that's, the richness and color is what you're going for. Large print size, as we know, with large format, medium format, 100% worth it for that. I think unless you're shooting really fancy landscapes and on a big format film, I don't think it's worth it. To be honest, I would personally be not as happy, but more than content, more than enough to be content shooting the D200 in essentially the same way, because the CCD sensor doesn't have a great dynamic range like modern digital cameras, and the color output is quite beautiful off that sensor, that 10 megapixel sensor. So I don't think I would bother with shooting slide film going forward. Like I said, I still recommend, if you've never shot slide film, you've got to give it a try. Everyone has to give it a try. And like I said, whack those negatives on a light table and see how good it looks, or how good your exposures were, how correct they were. It's definitely worth it in that sense. But unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be spending my hard-earned cash on that, because the other way I look at it is, I shot one. If I shoot 3 rolls of Ektachrome at those price and develop and scan, that's a bulk roll. That's a 100-foot bulk roll of black and white film, which I would much rather shoot personally. So I hope you enjoyed that, guys, a little ride. The results maybe gave you an insight. Maybe it solidified your thoughts on slide film. Maybe it's made you want to shoot slide film. Maybe it's made you not want to shoot slide film. Either way, I hope you got some enjoyment out of this video. As always, guys, thanks for watching another episode of Shoots with Coops, and I'll see you in the next episode.